this evening. I'm Emma. Dianah Chiyangwa is an award-winning Zimbabwean-born photojournalist and documentary photographer. Marina is a web developer and a gender equality, diversity and inclusion officer at the Jordan Open Space Source Association. Edilma is a research journalist from Colombia. And for the last 20 years, she's been covering the stories of Indigenous peoples, Mother Earth, borders, and territory, armed conflict, and climate issues. And Dr. Emma Heywood is a researcher and senior lecturer in journalism, radio, and communication at the University of Sheffield. So first of all, I'm going to ask Marina Alsahawneh to give us a brief presentation on the issue of gender-based violence in the context of Jordan.
Well, thank you, Emma. Good evening, everyone, or good morning and good afternoon to those who are joining us within a different time zone. First and foremost, I am very honored to be here in New York today as the whole world convenes for the Commission on the Status of Women. This big event provides a valuable opportunity for all of us, not only to share our experiences and knowledge, but also our passion for positive change and the advancement of human rights. Especially as this year's theme for CSW is, focuses on gender and technology and the interesting intersection between them. And so it is really great to be here. It is very important to acknowledge that when technology first began to become ubiquitous, many people have subscribe to what the famous digital sociologist Steve Wonder calls hyperbole, which means exaggerated claims about technology and what it can achieve. And he derived it from the English word hyperbole. Yeah, and so many people have, like, over the past decade, there has been a widespread belief, and it still is there still is a widespread belief that, let's say, technology is flawless and it will end or eliminate every form of bias and discrimination because it will simply reduce all human beings to no more than an IP address. And that sounds convincing, but the reality is way more complex. You know, in computer science, there is a concept known as formalism. So formalism means that computers take our input literally, letter by letter. And so they are capable not only of imitating and amplifying our harmful biases, but also, as we speak of the artificial intelligence, technology and computers will be able to generate. And during this panel, we will share plenty of examples of the biases that are present in technology and AI algorithms. And this brings me to our work at the Jordan Open Source Association. Our mission at JOSA is to bridge the gap between tech makers, technologists from one side, and activists, journalists, and researchers in humanities fields from the other hand. Because we have an elephant in the room, not only in Jordan, but globally speaking. The elephant in the room is that the vast majority of tech makers do not have what C. Wright Mills calls the sociological imagination, which means that they may struggle to understand what are the social problems and social issues and biases that already exists in their communities. On the other hand, we have journalists, activists, researchers in humanities who lack what I like to call technological imagination. You know, they do not have, let's say, a solid grasp of what technology is, what computers are, how do they work, and so this can limit their contribution and let's say their ability to actively and effectively contribute to correct the biases that might arise with technology. To address this gap, we at JOSA hold training sessions on a regular basis to participants from both broad areas, where we introduce them to the fundamentals of the other field. And so because we believe by doing this we are facilitating gender understanding and collaboration between the two groups, so that we can reach or achieve the technology and the artificial intelligence, or let's say the digital spaces that we are dreaming of. And speaking about technology, we at JOSA have taken steps to develop AI tools that can serve women in Jordan and maybe in the region in the near and distant future. So one example of what we at JOSA are doing is an AI tool called Noha. So Noha is able to, it will be released in a couple of months, and it is able to detect hate speech against women journalists and activists. So far, it can recognize Jordanian dialect as well as standard Arabic. Yeah, and to design Noha, or to help teach Noha how to recognize hate speech, we have used content from public accounts of more than 100 women activists and journalists in Jordan on various platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And so we do believe that by doing so, we are helping, first of all, we are helping researchers to study the phenomenon of gender-based violence against women activists. And we can help competent authorities to pinpoint the problem, you know, such as the anti-cybercrime unit in Jordan. So it's easier for them to detect such harmful content. And when we talk about journalists, it's also very important that that in order to build a more safe and build a safer and a more inclusive digital space, it is crucial for women to have skills like to know how to protect themselves against cyber attacks and cyber gender-based violence. So we at JOSA hold training sessions for women journalists and activists in Jordan. We teach them the foundations of cybersecurity or digital safety, like how to use VPNs to stay anonymous on the internet if they are writing on some sensitive topics, and what protocols to follow in case of cyber attacks and cyber gender-based violence, like what to do, whom to reach out to. And we also teach them best practices when it comes to using technology and to protect their devices against hacking and other attacks. And apart from empowering women journalists and activists themselves, we also think that if we are to create a safer and more inclusive digital space, a safer and more inclusive technology, a safer and more inclusive artificial intelligence, we should get women more involved in the tech making. You know, they should get more involved in the tech industry. Unfortunately, for instance, according to Microsoft's GitHub, women account for less than 3% of open source contributors, which is really sad to know. Because this underrepresentation of women will perpetuate the discrimination that technology has against them. And or as put by the French philosopher Paul-Michel Foucault, he argued that knowledge is always an exercise of power, and power is always a function of knowledge. So if we are to build a safer internet, then we should get women more like into coding, into programming. So I will leave some space for questions and maybe questions from the audience. And I just wanted to once again express how delighted I am to be here in this panel discussion today. And I would also like to thank every one of you for the time and effort to be here with us today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Marina. That was really interesting, and you've taught me a new word, hyperbole. I've never heard of that before. That's great, and we'll definitely pick up some of your contributions later, especially around the kind of contribution of women to content online. And I was reading recently that on Wikipedia, 80% of the content on Wikipedia is written by men. Yeah. And and that's being used to train ChatGPT, for example. And so it's just a reason why we need women to be writing content online about our world and our realities. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite Edilma Prada Céspedes to speak. Please, and you're going to speak, and we're going to have some translation into English. So thank you very much. Go ahead.
Bueno, bien, muchísimas gracias para todos, para todas.
To every one of you. A bit from.
Quiero saludar a las personas que están aquí presentes, también a las personas que nos siguen en los distintos territorios a través de esta transmisión.
And I'd like to greet everyone that is present and everyone that is in the different platforms that are online right now.
Para mí es un orgullo representar la diversidad de medios de comunicación que hay en América Latina.
For me, it's a pride to represent the diversity of different.
De acuerdo con cifras de SembraMedia, el 38% de mujeres somos líderes y hemos fundado medios desde la diversidad.
SembraMedia, 30% plus are women and have founded different media up to diversity.
La buena noticia es que hay una diversidad también en las agendas periodísticas.
Good thing is that there is a diversity within the journalistic agendas.
Por ejemplo, el medio que yo lidero, que se llama Agenda Propia,
For example, the one that I lead, which is called Agenda Propia,
los temas de producción periodística están enfocados en narrar las realidades de los pueblos indígenas en América Latina. Los temas que lideramos
topics that we lead
están relacionados con las realidades de los pueblos indígenas en América
are
Latina.
related to the realities of the indigenous people throughout Latin America.
Estamos cubriendo historias sobre derechos individuales y colectivos,
We're covering stories about individual and collective rights,
violencias contra los territorios y los cuerpos de las mujeres.
violence against the territories and bodies of women.
Estamos tocando temas sensibles como la presentación del genocidio físico y cultural,
We're talking about sensitive topics like cultural and physical genocide,
despojo de tierras, daños a la madre tierra,
expropriation of land and damage to Mother Earth,
la presencia de grupos criminales en los territorios indígenas,
presence of criminal groups in indigenous territories,
desplazamiento forzado y el racismo de distintos tipos y formas.
forced eviction, and also different types of racism in different forms.
Todo lo hacemos a través de plataformas digitales, que es la base del medio de comunicación que represento.
We do it in different digital platforms, which is the way that we represent to communicate.
Sin embargo,
Nonetheless,
es necesario reconocer
it is necessary to recognize
que la innovación social es la más importante que la tecnología.
that social innovation is more important than technology.
Son más importantes las voces de las comunidades.
The voices of the communities are more important.
Son más importantes las voces de los liderazgos indígenas, sabios y sabias de los territorios.
The voices of the white indigenous men and women is more important.
Hemos llegado a comunidades indígenas en América Latina donde no ha llegado la tecnología aún.
We have gotten to the different peoples and territories of indigenous people that technology hasn't been able to reach.
Territorios apartados donde no tienen acceso, nunca han tenido acceso ni siquiera a energía.
Territories that are so far that haven't even had the access to energy.
Entonces, como periodistas en esta era digital,
So as journalists in this digital era,
hemos aprendido que debemos mezclar dos temas.
we have learned that we must mix two topics.
Primero, reconocer lo tradicional. El
First.
periodismo tradicional sigue siendo importante.
Recognize what's traditional. Traditional journalism continues to be important.
Y segundo, que el periodismo digital puede ampliar las voces de lo local para lo global.
And second, the digital journalism can amplify what is local to what is global.
Hemos aprendido que nunca había sido más importante que hoy día se haga periodismo de investigación.
We have learned that now more than ever, it's more important to do investigative journalism.
Pero también hemos aprendido que el periodismo debe ser intercultural y debe ser colaborativo.
And we have also learned that journalism must be intercultural and collaborative.
Les quiero presentar un poco el método de trabajo con el que trabajamos, con el que lideramos en Agenda Propia.
And I'd like to show you the method that we work, with which we lead in Agenda Propia.
Nuestro primer proceso ha sido de co-creación periodística.
The first one is journalism procreation.
Nos hemos juntado con periodistas y narradores locales indígenas y no indígenas.
We have met with local indigenous journalism and also non-indigenous people as well,
Para hacer producción con estas realidades complejas que atraviesan los pueblos indígenas en América Latina.
to do production about these complex realities that these indigenous people and towns in Latin America are going through.
Estamos promoviendo además formación intercultural
And we're also promoting intercultural formation.
y también estamos promoviendo el intercambio y redes de comunicadores.
And we're also promoting the exchange in the communication networks.
Si quieres, puedes pasar.
Can you?
Algo importante que me gustaría mencionar
Something important I would like to mention
en esta sesión paralela de apoyo a las Naciones Unidas
in this parallel session, which is in support of the United Nations,
es que es importante que los medios de comunicación reconozcamos
Is
que
that-
hay periodistas indígenas.
is that in the means of communications, it's important to recognize that there are indigenous journalists
Y por eso hemos creado la Red Tejiendo Historias.
and
Red Tejiendo Historias.
and that's why we have created this network of making histories.
Somos 374 periodistas
It's 334 journalists,
indígenas y no indígenas en América Latina.
indigenous and non-indigenous in Latin America.
Estamos en 17 países.
We're present in 17 countries.
Somos más de 220 mujeres en esta comunidad.
In this community, it's over 220 women.
Y en esta red hay 40 pueblos indígenas reconocidos.
And in this network, there are 40 different indigenous towns recognized.
En América Latina hay más de 800 pueblos indígenas.
In Latin America, there are over 800 different indigenous towns.
Y todos tienen su forma de narrar y sus realidades.
And all of them have a different way to narrate their realities.
Por eso también tenemos que promover narrativas diversas,
And that's why it is important to promote diverse narratives
que pasen desde lo digital,
that go from the digital,
pero que también sean narrativas que se vean, se escuchen, se sientan en las comunidades.
but that can be felt in the different communities and that can be felt and seen in the different communities.
En este tiempo de afectación y de daño climático,
In this times of damage for the environment,
es muy importante medios como Agenda Propia.
medias like Agenda Propia is important,
Y necesitamos que nos apoyen para seguir promoviendo un periodismo distinto.
and we need your support to continue promoting this kind of distinct journalism.
Toda la formación,
All of the
experiencias,
experiences.
las estamos realizando, las estamos
We realizing
en un repositorio de formación
In the information repository,
que hemos llamado Mochila de Saberes.
we have called the bag of knowledge.
Es importante también compartir los saberes del periodismo
It is important to share the knowledge of journalists,
de las comunidades y del periodismo de hoy,
the journalism of the communities and the journalism of today,
del periodismo de datos,
the data journalism,
el periodismo que mapea las historias,
the journalism that maps the histories,
el periodismo que es microperiodismo a través de redes sociales.
the journalism which is micro journalism from social media.
Esta experiencia de periodismo intercultural
This experience from intercultural journalism,
que parte de la base digital,
which is part of the digital base,
también garantiza una seguridad a las comunidades.
also guarantees safety to the community.
Primero, confianza
First, trust
de que las narrativas son más cercanas a la realidad de las comunidades.
that the narratives are closer to the realities of the communities,
Y segundo, porque somos conscientes
because we are knowledge conscious
de crear protocolos de seguridad interculturales.
to create the protocols for intercultural safety.
La seguridad que establecen las grandes industrias no es la seguridad que deben tener estas comunidades.
The safety that the big industries that are creating are not the ones that these communities need.
Y la seguridad que se requiere para los periodistas que cubrimos los territorios indígenas
And the safety that these journalism are covering for the indigenous peoples,
también debemos reconocer
we must also
la
recognize
seguridad que ofrecen la sabiduría de los pueblos indígenas.
the security, the safety and security that the wisdom of the indigenous people are providing.
Quiero volver a mencionar
I would like
que
to
lo
mention
más
again,
importante son las voces de las comunidades
the most important thing is the voices of the communities.
y que tan solo estas herramientas digitales son un canal
And this medias, digital means of communication are just channels
que ayudan a elevar el mensaje de lo que está pasando en los territorios.
that help spread the message of what's going on in the territories.
El mundo, la sociedad
Society
debe reconocer
must
que hay
recognize
diversidad
that there is diversity,
y debemos respetar los distintos pensamientos y cosmovisiones.
and we must respect the different kinds of thoughts and worldviews.
Desde los medios de comunicación, que
From the-
también hemos discriminado a estas comunidades,
Media, we have also discriminated against these communities
pero también de las grandes industrias
from the big industries
que siguen haciendo daño con formas distintas, formas no adecuadas de narrar las historias.
different kind of damages by not appropriately narrating the story, the realities.
Finalmente, quiero mencionar que también es importante reconocer
Finally, I would like to also mention that it's important to recognize
que somos muchas mujeres las que estamos liderando medios de comunicación comunitarios
there's many women
y
that are leading
digitales.
community and digital means of communication.
Y estamos liderando los medios
And we're leading these media
que informan desde lo local para lo global,
that are informing from the local to the global,
desde los territorios. Como mi caso, yo vivo en la Amazonía colombiana.
starting in the territories, like for example, myself in the Colombian Amazon.
Ya, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dianah. We'll be talking later about some really important questions around why it's so important to empower Indigenous people and communicators, especially at a time of climate crisis. But next, I'm going to go to introduce Dianah Chiyangwa, who is, as I said earlier, an award-winning Zimbabwean photojournalist and documentary photographer. So please go ahead, Dianah, and talk about it.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. Drawing to the work that I've done last year in terms of the safety of female journalists, not only in South Africa, but across the continent. The research that was done by UNESCO and was commissioned by UNESCO and done by Este, indicates that more than 900 female journalists from 125 countries, a third of the female journalists suffer online abuse. And as a result, many of them, they have stopped working and they have stopped using social media to update their work on the ground due to these online abuses. As much as social digital spaces have allowed female journalists to connect virtually, to also enhance their skills, and it also opens them opportunities for their career in the context of South Africa. Online abuse has gone on the rise, and recently there is one of the journalists, she's a mainstream media reporter. She was bullied, and I think she has grown that resilient. I think the challenge that we have, especially in the SADC region, is the support, especially from within the bodies that are supposed to protect female journalists. I've made a small slide.
Like, and this is not very good for viewing your phone.
So
describe what's in the phone.
So these are some of the, as much as South Africa has managed to send female journalists to cover crimes and protest, online they are not protected. It's just abuse after abuse. If it's not body shaming, if it's not death threat, it's an ongoing thing. So I believe that there has to be a solution that needs to be done in order to protect female journalists from these challenges that they face. Because I believe that the work that they do, they not only representing themselves, but they are telling human stories on the ground. So I believe that if SADC region especially can have platforms that can empower, especially young women, empower them with the skills and tools on how to protect themselves online,
Thank you very much, Dianah. And we're definitely going to come back to the theme of how female journalists are being put off from doing their job, but they're really important job in these really kind of crucial times where there's a constellation of different crises. I think. But I'm going to introduce our final speaker, who's Emma Heywood from University of Sheffield. You're going to give us a slightly different perspective on different kind of media used to get messages out. So go ahead.
Thank you. As Emma said, I'm a researcher from University of Sheffield in the UK, and I collaborate with Fondation Hirondelle. I don't know whether any of you have. Sorry, is there a problem with the mic? Oh, yeah, I'll put it closer. Is that better? Is it even working? I'll speak louder. Okay, so right. So just to recap, I'm a lecturer from University of Sheffield in the UK, and I work in collaboration with Fondation Hirondelle, who is a Swiss-based media development organisation. It was founded in 1995, and they provide information to populations faced with crisis, and they empower them in their daily lives. So together, over the last 5 years or so, I've been assessing their programmes and doing impact assessments on the work they do related to women and women's empowerment and women's rights. So I generally work with radio, and this can be radio broadcasts which are targeting women, about women and for women, but also targeting men as well as society's main decision makers. So our approach is participatory, it's often remote, and so therefore it has to be collaborative. And we're working in areas in Mali, Niger. You can move on to the next slide if you could. I work in Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso, where there is increased insecurity, conflict, there's displaced persons, high levels of poverty, and where women are increasingly heads of households because their male relatives have either migrated to seek seasonal work or worse still have been massacred. And there's also a very quickly changing media environment as there's the influence of external forces, for example, Russia, China, France, and so on. For example, recently in Mali, community radio is being paid by RT to distribute their messages. So, and this is the same in Burkina Faso and the Central African Republic. So, next slide. So we've been hearing a lot about ICT, networks, internet, and so on. But in this case, this is a bit of a global north perception of ICT. And that's before we even talk about the associated dangers. So the areas that I work in and do my research, it's a totally different reality. It doesn't consider the global north perception, doesn't consider contexts where there is limited internet, or it's accessed by the elite or by men rather than women. There's limited access to devices, limited money to buy credit, and there's displaced persons and also illiterate populations in the global south. And it's this tension that I'm going to talk a few minutes about now, and the necessary convergence of traditional media and new media to promote safety amongst women and to promote inclusivity. So, as I say, there's a lot of talk about the disruptive effect of digital technology on radio, both as a device and in terms of broadcasting and listening practices, with it being suggested that traditional FM radio's very survival is threatened in the global north. But the global north understanding of radio and technology is different, and we have to consider context and communication and communities. So in our contexts, in the west of Africa, radio is a main source of information, and main threats amongst them are more political and economic, and their business models were already quite fragile before digitisation. So the main thing is to maintain a professional and inclusive media. And so as my research continues, there's a high emphasis that I noticed from Fondation Hirondelle on a hybrid approach to make sure that, you know, like if this is inclusive, no one's left behind. So next slide. So why is radio, why does it work? So it's an important tool in conflict affected areas for women. It can provide information, quick, fast information, and you can find information about your home villages. It promotes social cohesion. It provides basic information about to the displaced, but it also overcomes literacy barriers. So there's low levels of school completion, particularly low for women. So they won't be able to access the internet because of literacy and lack of knowledge of the colonial language. So also radio can be accessed by radio sets and mobiles. There's also VMO. I don't know whether anyone's heard of VMO. It's a system where you can type in 1, 2, 3 and you can download a program, a radio program. So there you've got that convergence of the digital accessing the legacy media. And you can have loads of different ways of getting radio of different formats, be it a debate, a discussion, news, sketches, so on and so forth. So you need to take all of this into account, and we need to target female youth audiences, but also the whole population. And if you want any information about my research findings and articles, you can have a look on the website that's there, rather than going through it all now. So next slide. So ICT and digital technologies are important in conflict affected areas. I'm not saying they're not in any way. And in fact, they deterritorialize the radio broadcasting and listening. So both symbolically and in practice, and they circumvent the physical restrictions imposed on traditional radio and conflict. So radio may only be able to reach a certain area, whereas ICT and other internet can go beyond that. So listeners and journalists, they need these links with the outside world, with the villages they've left or fled, and the digital communities can provide this, illustrating this collective and the associated social cohesion, and it's not been undermined by technologies. So it's not restricted by geographical boundaries, but also one thing we have found in our research is that we've been able to use digital technologies, particularly WhatsApp, to gain feedback from listeners in order to improve the very broadcasts that are targeting these particular communities. So on the next slide, if there's a next slide, there's a couple of articles. If you're interested, they're open access. You can download them. They're there for you. That's how we used WhatsApp to collect information from listeners. However, next slide. There are dangers in the conflict zones of using the ICTs, internet, network, whatever. It can lead to the marginalized communities in conflict situations, 80% of which are women, becoming even more isolated, especially if they don't have access to that internet. There's also misinformation. WhatsApp social networks are the most distrusted. That's what we found out in our research. So people turn to radio to check and to cross-reference all the information they're hearing on social network. So the ICTs they're facilitating the spread of disinformation, but the main driver here isn't necessarily the technological aspect. It's the lack of information in the face of uncertainty that helps the disinformation spread. Because whilst misinformation in the global north may be because of the excess information, in fact, it's the vacuum, the information vacuum that in sub-Saharan Africa, which is the problem. So therefore people will seize any information they can. Any information is better than none. One of the things that that's been noted is the WhatsApp groups. They're widely used, but they are infiltrated by terrorists, presenting dangers both to women journalists and to women online chat groups who may chat innocently, but too much. And also their sons' groups have been infiltrated, and they're being recruited, so greater awareness is needed there. So also phones, people are communicating on the phone and listening on their phone. Their mobile phones are immediately seized by the terrorists because they may contain incriminating or even useful information. So therefore people are exercising great caution over their phone's content, and therefore it's reducing the potential of that tool, the ICT tool. So what about the communities and the regions which are isolated? If you go on to the next slide. Here we see a convergence between old and new media, and there are multiple benefits here for women, because we see that there's a modernisation of traditional modes of listening. So where people would sit around listening to their transistor radio, or because they haven't got a mobile phone or anything like that, solar powered radios have been provided, and therefore this promotes the collective listening that is predominant in amongst many communities, and therefore it promotes social cohesion as well. There are also loudspeaker systems, sound systems, and these overcome geographical and technological isolation, particularly amongst internally displaced persons and host communities in conflict zones. So they enable collective listening. They enable women to discuss information, pass on information, and importantly, explain complex information to others in the group. So broadcasts are played to listener collectives, and then therefore you get a re-territorialization of regions which are under threat, whereby replacing the internet. So you've got the deterritorialization, which is with the internet, and the re-territorialization with this technologically advanced form of the old legacy media. So in conclusion, so we might recognize that radio may be shifting towards a new radio paradigm, proclaiming the internet and online listening. I think we're on the next slide. Proclaiming the internet and online listening to be the new future must be contextualized. So when we're investigating women, radio and radio news in times of conflict, the essentialist FM versus internet binaries must be avoided. So convergence is the new future, and listener journalists shouldn't select one or the other, but subject to the vagaries and inconsistencies of a conflict environment. So thank you very much for listening.
Very much, and I'm a big lover of radio. I get all my music radio, so I'm glad it's still alive. So we're going to have a bit of a chat in the panel, and then there's going to be a chance for you to answer the questions from the group, but also online. I just want to pick up the issue around how dangerous it is for women journalists out there. We're talking about very eloquently. And, you know, I was speaking to a journalist recently this week who was telling me about, you know, the terrible experiences that she's had, the smear campaigns against her. Stories were being told that she was a sex worker, and that she was, when she did interviews on TV, those interviews were taken off and like she was saying something different to what she was actually saying on TV. It was a very, very sustained campaign, and I could see how tired she was and the trauma that she was experiencing through that, going on for 12 years. And so I just wanted to ask you both really about why you think it is so important for female journalists to be safe online, and what we're losing when these women journalists decide to retreat. So Dianah, I think it is important to journalists because of mental health issues. A lot of them have issues.
I think it is important to support female journalists. to avoid mental health issues. Because a lot of them, they go through a lot of trauma. And then they don't have that relationship with these challenges that they face, especially we are knowing
I do believe that, I do firmly believe that it is very important to for women journalists, especially that women are considered in most countries as a marginalized group. And so it's really important to empowerment, to provide proper support for them in case they receive gender-based violence. And you were discussing a story of a journalist who was blackmailed or something by a video, who was trimmed or video shot or edited.
Yeah.
Well, there was an incident in Jordan where a journalist was blackmailed by a video that did not exist. So the campaign that was done against her, it was like everywhere on social media you can see the video of her name, and then when you follow the links, there is no video, and everyone was. Have you watched the video of? Her name was Nadia, and have you watched the video of it? There was no video, but they manipulated the titles to silence her. And so it is really important to empower women and to provide the support they need to ensure that they can express their opinions and actively participate in digital public spaces.
Yeah, because we're losing, if we lose women's perspectives on the world and what's happening, we're losing out on understanding those realities, aren't we? And so it's really important to keep women in journalism. And Edilma, I wanted to pick up with you a couple of questions. I wanted to pick up with you around why you think it's essential to empower Indigenous communicators, especially Indigenous women, in digital journalistic tools at this time of this great climate crisis.
Bien, efectivamente, la crisis climática nos debe preocupar a todos y a todas.
Crisis must worry all of us.
El 80% de la biodiversidad que queda en el mundo
80% of biodiversity that is in the world
está en territorios indígenas
is in indigenous territory.
y ha sido protegida por los pueblos indígenas.
It has been protected by the indigenous people.
Y son los pueblos indígenas
And it's those people
los que nos deben enseñar con sus narrativas
that must teach us with their narratives
cómo proteger la biodiversidad.
how to protect biodiversity.
Y esta biodiversidad
And such biodiversity
está siendo amenazada
is
por
being threatened
las industrias extractivas,
by the extractive industries,
la deforestación,
deforestation,
el narcotráfico
drug trafficking, narco trafficking,
y distintas formas de extracción, agroindustria, por
and
ejemplo.
different kinds of extraction like agro-industry, for example.
Y esa sabiduría indígena que ha sostenido las selvas y los bosques,
These people have sustained the forests.
es importante que sea narrada por los propios comunicadores indígenas.
It's important that for it to be narrated by their own indigenous people.
Y es más importante que sea narrada por mujeres
And it's more important to be narrated by women
porque tiene una mirada de cuidadora del territorio.
because they have the perspective of the caregiver of the territory.
Las mujeres indígenas
The indigenous women
son las protectoras
are the protectors
de los conocimientos más sagrados de los territorios indígenas.
of the most sacred knowledge of this indigenous territory.
La lengua, por ejemplo,
The language, for example,
la alimentación de las comunidades.
the way that the communities eat.
Ellas son las que siembran muchas veces el alimento
They are the ones that plant a lot of these foods.
y ellas son las que transmiten los conocimientos a los hijos y a los nietos indígenas.
And they're the ones that transmit this knowledge to their indigenous children and grandchildren.
Entonces, lo que está pasando con la madre tierra
that was going on with Mother Earth
debe ser narrada por las propias narradoras indígenas.
must be narrated by the indigenous women narrators.
Los periodistas indígenas debemos aprender
The non-indigenous journalists must learn
de las formas tradicionales y de estas narrativas propias.
ways in this own appropriate narrative.
Los periodistas no indígenas
The non-indigenous journalists
podemos contribuir con más técnica, periodismo de datos,
can
tecnología,
contribute with more techniques,
ras-
data, technology,
rastrear estas industrias que están llegando a los territorios,
track this industry so that getting into this territory,
exigir a los gobiernos más datos abiertos.
demand more open data to the governments.
Por eso creo que es importante unirnos comunicadoras indígenas y comunicadoras no
And
indígenas.
that's why it's important for women, indigenous women communicators and non-indigenous women communicators to unite.
Vuelvo a repetir,
Myself,
las mujeres son cuidadoras de los territorios
women are the caregiver territories.
y las narrativas deben ser narrativas de esperanza y de cuidado,
And narratives must be narratives of hope and care.
aún en contextos digitales, para informar bien de lo local para lo global.
Context to communicate from the local to the global.
Yes, thank you. And that importance of communicating from the local to the global. I wanted to ask you why you think it's important to have a range of different digital narrative formats to bring these local issues from into the global domain.
No hay que desconocer que llegaron las redes sociales
We must not turn the blind eye to the social media.
y que la mayoría de las personas estamos conectadas a través de estas nuevas tecnologías.
And the majority of the people are connected to the new technology.
Entonces, lo que pasa en los territorios,
So what's going on in territories,
campesinos, zonas apartadas,
these places that are so far,
incluso en las periferias de las ciudades,
even the peripheral of the great cities,
la gente se está enterando de esa forma a través de las redes
are
sociales,
finding out through social media,
a través de las plataformas digitales, medios como la propia.
digital platforms, media. Appropriate.
Y es importante formarnos más en estas nuevas formas de narrar
And it's important to get to know this new forms to narrate
y pasar esos relatos de las comunidades a través de estas plataformas, de esta tecnología.
stories. This knowledge.
Por ejemplo,
For example,
es muy importante poder mostrar que hay diversidad en las lenguas,
it's very important to show that there's diversity in the tongue as well, in the language,
los distintos saberes.
the different knowledge.
Y es clave que lo hagan también las comunidades
And it's
directamente.
important for the community,
Y ya se están empoderando a través de estas redes
and
sociales.
they're all already being empowered through the social media.
Y para eso también funciona un poco la tecnología, para que ese mensaje local
And that's what this semana is good for this local,
salga hacia afuera.
can go outside
Los periodistas,
journalists.
yo le pedí investigación y creo que el periodismo tiene que seguir acompañando a las comunidades.
I believe in this investigative journalists and that this journalist must give a company to this community.
Considerar esos saberes como voces oficiales también.
Consider this knowledge, way of knowledge as official narrative.
Y debemos seguir cuestionando a los gobiernos,
And we must continue to question the government,
pero siempre respaldando las voces de las comunidades.
but also supporting the voices of the community.
Thank you very much. And Emma, you touched on this in your presentation, but I really wanted to hear more about the idea of collective listening. Because you talk about the individualization of listening that's associated with digital technologies where we're just listening on our own. It's a private experience. And I wanted to hear more about the collective listening practices in many communities and how they affect women. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, a lot of the sometimes and when we see when they are becoming talking to the local activities, threats from journalists, they're going to this place, and then they're getting information from each other, from the internet. So the collective listening is still happening via the digital technology. So whereas you'd think that it could be individualized, it's actually not. And this is replicating the oral tradition that is dominant in many of these areas, whereby people will sit around a radio, they'll create associations, and then all the information ripples through a community face to face. But in fact, although it may be going face to face with a radio, and that is still carrying on, it's still also happening through the internet as well. So we proved that there's a very strong collective listening on the internet when they're passing on the radio information online and via the journalists when they talk to each other.
People in the audience.
¿Alguien en la audiencia quisiera preguntar alguna pregunta? ¿Alguien en la audiencia quisiera hacer una pregunta? Buenas noches a todos. Pregunta. Solo los que yo pienso. Mejor. ¿Qué tengo el tema?
Because it shows that more issues on women were not really portrayed in the media. So if more female journalists are resigning, it means something. There's going to be lesser female perspective in the media, and that's not what we're aiming for. We're aiming for an increase and not for an increase. So my positive and from a solution perspective, I think the same way that Emma has drawn a connection between media and IT. I think there's a connection between researchers and journalists in this fight for safe online space. I'm glad Emma is here because she's from the investor of sharing. I think investor of sharing is just like market, and it's research on. They did an online analysis of different companies, social media companies that actually know people who journalists, a very aggressive one. And believe me, some of the journalists were surprised that it was that bad. They didn't know some of those contents. Some of them were actually, they didn't see it. So after the whole thing, we were surprised and like, was this bad? And so I'm thinking, some of these researches, they are beautiful, they are done, and they serve as very good evidence, all telling our story, with all names, all name claims. But then a lot of people don't know about this research outside the academic, outside the civil society. And I think that the connection between journalism and researchers always be. There has to be like, okay, I know one, for example, last year, had a partnership with Good for Africa. So what they did was, the report of their research was being amplified by some of the journalists that selected as fellows. I was part of the fellowship. And I think researchers in the academia can start looking at this also. We've done this work. How do we amplify? How do we get out of the university? How do we get out of our offices as NGOs? Let's work with journalists. So journalists can go out and say, this is the problem. And I'm not just telling you that the problem. I'm telling you that the problem from an informed perspective. I'm telling you that the problem because I have evidence. I have the data because a university, a civil society has done this research. Then we can all collectively, I don't know what collectively, but this time around it's collective saying, so we can all amplify our voices at the end. It's just a voice.
Yeah, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much. NGOs, fantastic.
and very important point to make as well. I've been working as a researcher, academic researcher, with NGOs for quite some time. One thing we found is that while there's this difference between what we write in academia, what is needed by civil society, and the writing jargon, we write massively long documents. It takes to get anything published, and then by which time it's too late. So what we're trying to do now is produce in one of our research projects is that we actually did research with radio, and we did content analysis and listener feedback at the same time, and we fed it back in a continuous loop to the journalists. So they had the information within a couple of weeks. Then we were able to extract the best practice and the recommendations. They were able to implement it and see if there was any, and it carried on and got better and better. However, one thing we did find is that even our reports that were 5 pages with highlighted the bits, bold, all of this, they were still too long. And because they have their own work to do, and we didn't want to impose, and if they were, there was always that bonus that we put on. So in our next project, we're going to be giving recommendations to journalists and to civil society in like WhatsApp messages. So that it could be all, people will listen to it, they can do it as they're walking around in their car or whatever, and then they can get the information from us, and then when they want to, they can have the official report down the line whenever it comes out. But we've got to learn as researchers how to convey our material to be useful to the outside world, and also to get that interaction speaking more.
I think we have, and just to add a bit, I think as a session, might not also need to go on the extra word of simplifying and there's a part of the journal where like the journal that so it's easy to complicate I think it's one of the
that's another project we're doing. So it's the project we're doing is to simplify the understanding of academic work, put it in podcasts, and journalists are really putting it into using words for the public in podcasts. It's a production I can share it with you.
Do we have any more questions or comments from the audience? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this session. Come from China. There are any initiatives or projects to facilitate communication and dialogue and cooperation between among civil societies, citizen journalists, or digital communicators and researchers or other media organizations. For example, in China now, the ICT empowered women activists, LGBT, some feminist but that to empower people to create the more comprehensive content. But at the same time, we also encountered the state surveillance or the smear campaign or other on-site sexual harassment or other violence against communicators. So I'm wondering crisis among women or journalist communicators interest our collective power to combat the violence and
Thank you. Thank you. I think Marina's going to answer that. Thank you very much. Yeah, we will have to draw to a close in a couple of minutes. But yeah,
there are actually a couple of initiatives that have started recently to a year or 2 years ago, such as the Incubating Feminist AI initiative by the A+ Alliance. It does not only aim at creating a fairer AI, but also it aims at uniting people and researchers from various disciplines to come and work together on these issues and to come up with solutions on how to create like a better and a safer digital space for women activists and women in general.
Just to add on what Marina is saying, there's also International Media Women's Foundation, IWMF. It also have a very huge platform that are open to opportunities like the ones that you are also mentioning. There's also WAN-IFRA. They also offers online platforms. I think this will be the last question or comment before we draw to a close.
Thank you so much for all the research to that, the country about the way that you try to know, the way you try to know the people, the stories of the country. And I want to know your experience as a journalist, being part of this, the civil society. In my perspective, sometimes I know both sides of the story. I mean, I know that sometimes people blame media because they are not like transparent or they do not give like the real information to us. But I know that sometimes journalists all face challenges. I don't know, pressure from other persons, or I don't know, corruption, money, all of that. So I want to know your experience as a journalist. I mean, you have like your goal that is to let know those stories of those women's. But I want to know what challenges have you faced in your profession.
Wow, muchos desafíos.
Many challenges.
Yo creo que el más importante
I
es
think the most important is
defender en el
to
periodismo
defend in journalism
una forma distinta de hacer periodismo.
a different way of practicing journalism.
En este caso,
In this case,
las voces
the
indígenas
indigenous voices,
y también como periodista, cuando hay
also
una
as a
agenda
journalist,
distinta,
when there's a different agenda,
el mismo gremio también te discrimina de alguna
also
manera.
your people also discriminate you against you in a certain way.
Entonces también
So,
debemos ser más fuertes
we
cuando
must
tenemos una agenda
be stronger.
de diversidad.
When we have a diversity agenda,
Adicional,
and
la
additionally,
seguridad.
safety.
Yo llevo 20 años cubriendo
I've been covering for 20 years
realidades de los pueblos indígenas,
the realities of different indigenous
de las
people,
comunidades,
of the communities
en el marco de un conflicto armado.
in an environment of an armed conflict.
En Colombia llevamos
Colombia.
más de 50 años de conflicto armado.
It's been over 50 years of armed conflict.
Hace 6 años se firmó un acuerdo de paz,
6 years ago, and a peace agreement was signed,
pero los periodistas seguimos cubriendo
but journalists are still covering
crímenes de líderes indígenas,
crimes from indigenous leaders,
amenazas
Threats.
permanentes, ataques,
attacks,
la presencia de grupos criminales.
presence of criminal groups.
Entonces debemos también cuidarnos desde
We must take care of
estos
ourselves
espacios físicos.
in these physical spaces.
Además, yo vengo de un país donde el Estado también
And I come from a
ha
country
interceptado las llamadas de los
The
periodistas.
state has also wiretapped the conversations of journalists.
Muchos colegas, incluso colegas mujeres, han sido
Many-
interceptados en comunicación.
Colleagues, even female colleagues, have gotten their communications wiretaps.
Creo que debemos ser auténticos como periodistas
And I think we must be, as journalists, we must be authentic,
para cuidarnos y protegernos en el oficio.
care for each other and protect each other in our craft.
Debemos dejar a las comunidades con sinceridad y con verdad.
And we must go towards the communities with sincerity and with the will to tell the truth.
Y confiar más en lo que pasa en los territorios.
More in what happens in the territory.
Los gobiernos siempre mienten.
The governments always lie.
Para mí, la voz oficial debe ser la voz del gobierno.
For me, the official voice must not be the government's voice.
Y defender esta posición
And defend this position,
que hace parte de la agenda editorial de Agenda Propia,
which is part of this, my agenda for Agenda Propia,
también ha sido cuestionada por otros colegas.
has also been questioned by other colleagues.
Entonces creo que también hay que defender un poco
So,
estas posiciones.
I think we must also
desde lo
defend this
editorial.
position from the editorial perspective.
Todo desde el respeto también a la
Everything
hora de hacer
starting
periodismo.
from respect at the time of practicing journalism.
Yo respeto a los colegas
I respect my colleagues,
y las formas tradicionales me
And
enseñaron a
traditional
hacer
ways.
periodismo,
taught me to practice journalism,
pero debemos también mejorar estas prácticas que también han
But we
hecho
must
daño
also
a las narrativas y a
improve these practices that have
y las
damaged
formas de narrar.
the narratives and the ways to narrate.
Cierro un poco con esto.
And I close a little bit with this.
El conflicto armado colombiano,
The Colombian armed conflict,
los periodistas lo narramos desde la voz oficial.
the journalists, we narrated through the official voice.
Muy pocos periodistas
Very few journalists,
los narramos desde las víctimas.
we narrated through the victims.
Las víctimas empezaron a hablar
The victims.
durante las negociaciones
Started to talk
y en la implementación de los acuerdos.
during the negotiations and during the implementation of the agreement.
Se informa, los medios hemos informado verdades fragmentadas.
The media has informed fragmented truth,
Una verdad oficial tal vez
maybe an official truth,
y un porcentaje pequeño de la verdad de las comunidades, de las víctimas.
a small percentage of the truth from the victim's perspective.
Por eso creo que
And that's why I believe
debemos validar más las voces de las comunidades, ya sean campesinas,
We must
negras,
validate the
indígenas.
voices of the people, whether they're farmers, blacks, indigenous,
Y hay que ser fuertes para poder desarrollar formas de periodismo distinto.
and we must be strong to form this way of different kind of journalism.
Y agradezco
And I
a
thank-
organizaciones que nos ayudan y
Organizations.
defienden nuestra forma de hacer periodismo.
To help us in the way we practice journalism.
Por ejemplo, SembraMedia
For example, SembraMedia
y otras organizaciones que nos acompañan y respetan nuestra forma también.
other organizations that are with us and respect our ways as well.
Es una manera también de generar confianza con las audiencias y las comunidades.
It's a way to generate trust with the people and the public.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have one final question from one of our online. participants.
So, we have a question. We have a question online that says, you're all doing work that inspires, and I believe you have an audience that wants to support you today. So I'd like to give all of you a chance to share with us what you most need. We all know you need funding support, but what else can we do to help you in your important mission?
Is there anything, Dianah, Marina, is there anything that you want to respond to that question about how we can help?
What everyone can do to help us is to spread the word, to share the information with every woman, you know, with every woman activist, with every woman journalist, you know, because some cyber attacks against women, some cyber gender-based violence threats that are imposed on women or that women face could have been avoided just by following like simple tricks or simple hacks. A couple of months ago, a friend of mine has reached out to us via our hotline at JOSA, and she said that a hacker has gained access to her camera and is blackmailing her now because she usually wears a hijab, and in Jordan it's something that women who wear hijab can be blackmailed. It can be used to blackmail women in Jordan. So all this could have been avoided just by using a camera blocker. So another woman journalist has reached out to us, and she has been hacked. And when we did our digital forensics things, it turned out that she has been hacked by clicking on a malicious link, a malicious URL. And this could have been avoided if only she knew that she can use some tools like VirusTotal to double check or to scan the URL before clicking on it to see if it's malicious or not. So what everyone can do is to share this information with everyone, to share these guides, to read them, to spread the word. I don't know.
I think especially in the SADC region, we have like lack of platforms where female journalists have their voice. The lady that I'm talking about, the female journalist who was recently attacked, she wrote her own story, but the story that she wrote about her challenges that she has faced online, it hasn't reached a wider audience. So for me, if we can have more platforms, especially in the SADC region, that allows female journalists to have a voice. We have a country like Zimbabwe, where I originally come from. Voices of female journalists are silenced completely, and we don't have those platforms. So if we get that support, especially to train female journalists on how to avoid these online attacks and how to tackle these challenges, I think we'll go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to know that there is support out there for women journalists to help them stay safer online and thus be able to continue to do their important work for as long as possible. And I'm very sorry that we have to call this session to a close. And I wanted to say thank you very much to our 4 wonderful speakers. And, and hopefully we'll see everybody again next year in this space. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us in the room and everybody online. And please take care and have a good evening. The person from the previous section, so